I thought I knew my wife after 15 years of marriage. I was wrong. Dead wrong. When my 12-year-old son casually mentioned seeing his mother with a stranger at a diner, I started digging. What I found wasn't just an affair. It was a criminal conspiracy that put my family in the crosshairs of dangerous men who collect debts with violence. My wife wasn't just cheating. She was being used as bait in a con game that could have cost us everything we'd built, including our lives. My name is Leroy Patterson. I'm 45 years old, and I own Patterson's Premium Meats, a processing facility that's been feeding half the county for the past 12 years. Started from nothing but a loan, a dream, and hands that weren't afraid of hard work. Build it into something that employs 23 people and puts good meat on tables across 3 counties. I met Marlene at a church barbecue back in 2010. She was helping serve plates, had this way of making everyone feel welcome. We got to talking over pulled pork and sweet tea, and I found myself coming back for seconds just to hear her laugh. She was 31 then, working as a dental hygienist, with these bright green eyes that seemed to light up when she smiled. Our courtship was traditional. Sunday dinners, long walks, church services together. I proposed at the same barbecue where we met, exactly 1 year later. She said yes with tears in her eyes, and I thought I was the luckiest man alive. We married in the spring of 2012, bought a 4-bedroom house on Maple Street with a big backyard perfect for kids. Marlene quit her job when Ricky came along, my boy, now 12 and already showing signs he might want to join the family business someday. 2 years later, little Tanya arrived, 10 years old now and the apple of my eye. Life had a rhythm to it. I'd leave for the plant at dawn, come home to the smell of dinner cooking and kids doing homework at the kitchen table. Marlene kept the house running like clockwork, school events, doctor's appointments, birthday parties. We were a team. The business grew steady. Started with just beef and pork, expanded into specialty processing for local hunters, then added a retail storefront. Marlene helped with the books in the early days, had a good head for numbers. We'd sit at that same kitchen table after the kids went to bed, planning expansions, dreaming about maybe opening a second location. But somewhere along the way, things started shifting. Marlene began spending more time on her phone, more late nights, helping her sister with wedding planning, more weekend trips to visit her mother who lived just fine on her own for 73 years. I trusted her completely. When you build something together, when you share bank accounts and raise children and plan futures, trust isn't even a choice. It's just the air you breathe. Never once did I question where she was going or who she was with. That trust, I'm learning now, was both my greatest strength and my biggest weakness. The first real sign something was off came on a Tuesday in March. I remember because it was the day we had to process 3 steers for the Johnson Ranch, and Marlene knew I'd be working late. She'd always made a point of having dinner ready when I got home, no matter how long my day ran. That night, I walked into an empty kitchen at 8:30. The kids were already fed and doing homework upstairs. Marlene was sitting at the kitchen table with her laptop, barely looking up when I came through the door. "Sorry, honey," Marlene said, not sounding particularly sorry. "Lost track of time working on this fundraiser for Tanya's school. There's leftover meatloaf in the fridge." I heated up my own dinner, which wasn't unusual by itself, but something about the way she said it felt rehearsed, like she'd been practicing the explanation before I got home. "What kind of fundraiser?" I asked, settling into my chair with the plate. "Oh, the usual spring carnival stuff," Marlene replied, still typing. "Silent auction, game booths, lots of organizing to do." I nodded and ate my meatloaf, but kept watching her. In 15 years together, Marlene had never been much for school volunteering. Parent-teacher conferences, sure. Class parties when required. But organizing fundraisers, that was new territory. Over the next few weeks, these fundraiser meetings started happening more often. Always in the evenings, always requiring her to leave right after dinner. She'd grab her purse, kiss me on the cheek, and say she'd be back by 10. Sometimes she made it, sometimes she didn't. These parents sure are dedicated. I mentioned one night when she got home at 11:15. "You have no idea," Marlene said, already heading upstairs. "Some of them want to plan every detail down to the napkin colors." The thing about running a meat processing business is that you learn to trust your instincts about when something's gone bad. There's a smell, a feeling, a wrongness that hits you before you can put it into words. Your gut tells you what your brain doesn't want to accept. My gut was starting to send signals. It was Ricky who first mentioned seeing his mom somewhere she wasn't supposed to be. We were throwing a baseball in the backyard on a Saturday afternoon when he casually said, "Dad, I saw Mom at Miller's Diner yesterday when I was with Tommy's family." I stopped mid-throw. When yesterday? During school. Tommy's mom took us for lunch after his dentist appointment, Ricky said, catching the ball. Mom was sitting with some guy I didn't recognize. She didn't see me, though. Miller's Diner was on the other side of town, nowhere near the school where these fundraiser meetings supposedly happened. And yesterday was Thursday, a school day, when Marlene should have been home preparing dinner. "You sure it was Mom?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. "Yeah, definitely," Ricky said, throwing the ball back. "She was wearing that blue sweater, the one you got her for Christmas." That blue sweater. I remembered it clearly because she'd made such a fuss about how much she loved it, how it was exactly her style. She'd worn it just yesterday morning when I left for work. I kept throwing the ball with my son, but my mind was elsewhere, running through possibilities, trying to find innocent explanations. Maybe it was a fundraiser meeting at the diner. Maybe the guy was another parent. Maybe Ricky was mistaken. But deep down, I knew better. The same instincts that told me when meat was starting to turn were telling me something else was going bad right under my own roof. When you run a meat processing plant, you learn that problems don't fix themselves. You either face them head-on or watch everything you've built rot from the inside out. After Ricky's revelation about seeing his mother at Miller's Diner, I knew it was time to start asking harder questions. I didn't confront Marlene directly. Not yet. Instead, I started paying attention to details I'd been overlooking for months. The way she checked her phone constantly during dinner. How she developed a sudden interest in taking long showers right after coming home from these meetings. The fact that she'd started doing her own laundry instead of throwing everything together like we'd done for 15 years. On Friday night, Marlene announced another fundraiser meeting. "This one might run late," she said, kissing my cheek. "Don't wait up." "Where's it at this time?" I asked, looking up from helping Tanya with her math homework. "The library." "Community room," Marlene replied without hesitation. "We're finalizing the vendor contracts for the carnival." After she left, I made a decision that went against every trusting bone in my body. I called my brother-in-law Jake, who works security at the library. "Jake, it's Leroy. Quick question. Is there anything booked in the community room tonight?" "Nope. All quiet here," Jake said. "Friday nights are dead. Just a few teenagers in the study area." "What?" My stomach dropped. "Just wondering." "Thanks, brother." I hung up and stared at the phone. 15 years of marriage, and my wife had just lied straight to my face while helping our daughter with homework. That night, Marlene came home at 12:30, claiming the meeting had run longer than expected because some parents couldn't agree on the ring toss prices. She smelled like cigarettes, which was strange since she quit smoking before we got married. The next morning, while Marlene was at her Saturday yoga class, another new routine she'd picked up, I decided to do something I'd never done before. I checked her phone records online. What I found made my blood run cold. Over the past 2 months, there were dozens of calls to a number I didn't recognize. Some lasting hours. Many happening when she was supposedly at home with me, which meant she'd been stepping outside or finding excuses to call from another room. I wrote down the number and ran it through a reverse lookup. Vernon Stockwell, age 41, divorced, lived across town in a rental house on Elm Street. Vernon Stockwell. The name meant nothing to me, but apparently it meant a great deal to my wife. I sat in my kitchen, staring at that name on my computer screen, feeling like the foundation of my world had just shifted beneath my feet. This wasn't some childhood friend or work colleague. This was a stranger who'd somehow become important enough for my wife to lie about. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. From anger. Pure, righteous anger at being played for a fool in my own home. Sunday morning service felt like sitting through a trial where I was both the defendant and the judge. Pastor Williams preached about trust and forgiveness, while I sat next to my wife wondering how long she'd been living a double life. Marlene sang hymns like nothing had changed, held my hand during prayers, smiled at the neighbors during fellowship. It was a masterful performance. After church, while Marlene took the kids to her mother's for Sunday dinner, a weekly tradition I'd begged off from to catch up on paperwork, I drove to Elm Street. Vernon Stockwell's rental house was a modest 2-bedroom with peeling paint and an overgrown yard. The silver Honda Civic in the driveway matched the car I'd seen pulling out of the library parking lot the night before when I'd driven by to check on Marlene's story. I didn't knock on the door. I wasn't ready for that confrontation. But I sat in my truck across the street for 20 minutes, studying the house, memorizing details, planning my next move like a hunter tracking prey. My phone buzzed with a text from Marlene. Having wonderful time with Mom. Kids are helping her plant tomatoes. Won't be home until late afternoon. Love you. Love you. The words felt like salt in an open wound. That evening, Marlene came home full of stories about her mother's garden and Ricky's enthusiasm for planting vegetables. She kissed me hello, helped Tanya with her spelling words, and made Sunday night pancakes like she'd done 1,000 times before. But I noticed things I missed before. The way she kept her phone face down on the counter. How she excused herself to check on laundry twice during dinner. The guilty flush in her cheeks when Tanya asked if Daddy could come to Grandma's next time. Of course Daddy can come, Marlene said, ruffling Tanya's hair. He's just been so busy with the plant lately. I looked at my daughter's innocent face and felt something break inside me. Not just my heart, but something deeper. The part of me that believed good people did good things, that vows meant something, that the woman I'd built a life with was who I thought she was. After the kids went to bed, I made a decision. If Marlene was going to live a double life, then I needed to know exactly what that life looked like. I couldn't protect my children from something I didn't fully understand. I pulled out my laptop and searched for private investigators in the county. Found one with good reviews and military background. A man named Chuck Morrison who specialized in domestic situations. The call I made that night changed everything. Not just because of what I might discover, but because it meant I'd stopped being the trusting husband and started being the protective father. Mr. Morrison, I said when he answered. I need to know if my wife is having an affair, and I need to know tonight. Chuck Morrison called me Monday morning with news that confirmed my worst fears and opened up possibilities I hadn't considered. I was in my office at the plant, reviewing weekend production numbers, when my phone rang. Leroy, it's Chuck. We need to meet. What I found is bigger than just an affair. We met at a truck stop outside town, away from prying eyes. Chuck slid a manila envelope across the greasy table, his expression grim. Your wife's been seeing Vernon Stockwell for about 4 months, Chuck said. But here's where it gets interesting. Stockwell's not just some random guy. He's got a gambling problem, owes serious money to some dangerous people in Charlotte. I opened the envelope and saw photographs of Marlene and Vernon together, but also documents that made my blood boil. Bank statements showing cash withdrawals from our joint account, receipts for expensive dinners and hotel rooms, a copy of a loan application Vernon had filled out, listing Marlene as a reference with access to substantial business assets. He's using her, I said, stating the obvious. It's worse, Chuck continued. I did some digging on this Vernon character. He's done this before. Targets wives of successful businessmen, gets them emotionally hooked, then starts bleeding them for money. His last mark was a contractor's wife over in Gastonia. Took her for $40,000 before her husband caught on. I studied the photos more carefully. In one, Vernon had his arm around Marlene outside a jewelry store. In another, they were walking into the Marriott downtown. But it was the last photo that really got my attention. Vernon talking to 2 men in expensive suits outside a pool hall known for hosting high-stakes poker games. Those 2 gentlemen he's chatting with, Chuck said, pointing to the photo, are associates of Tommy Ricci. You know that name. I knew it. Tommy Ricci ran book throughout the Carolinas. Not someone you wanted to owe money to. How much does Vernon owe? My sources say around 60 grand. And Ricci's been asking questions about Vernon's new girlfriend with a successful husband. The pieces were falling into place, and I didn't like the picture they were forming. Vernon wasn't just seducing my wife. He was positioning her as collateral for his gambling debts. Chuck, I need you to keep digging. But carefully. If these people think Marlene's husband might be a problem, things could get dangerous fast. Already on it, Chuck said. But Leroy, you need to start thinking about how you're going to handle this. Your wife's in deep with a man who's in deep with some very bad people. I drove back to the plant with my mind racing. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was about protection. My wife might be cheating, but she was still the mother of my children, and I wasn't going to let some gambling addict use her to pay his debts to dangerous men. That afternoon, I made a call to my cousin Dale, who worked in law enforcement. If this situation was going to get ugly, I needed to make sure I had the right people on my side. Tuesday evening brought the kind of conversation that changes everything. Marlene was late coming home again, claiming car trouble on her way back from another fundraiser meeting. While she was upstairs showering, my phone rang. It was Vernon Stockwell. "Is this Leroy Patterson?" The voice was smooth, confident, the kind of tone used by men who think they're smarter than everyone else. "Who's asking?" I replied, though I already knew. "Name's Vernon. I think we should meet. We have some mutual interests to discuss." The audacity of this man calling me directly made my jaw clench. "I don't believe we have anything to discuss." "Oh, but we do," Vernon said, his tone shifting slightly. "See, your wife and I have become quite close, and there are some financial matters that concern us both. I'm sure a successful businessman like yourself would want to resolve things amicably." I felt the anger rising, but kept my voice steady. "What exactly are you suggesting?" "Let's just say that Marlene has been very helpful in certain business ventures, and there are some outstanding obligations that need to be addressed. I'm thinking we could work something out that benefits everyone involved." The threat was clear. He was using Marlene to get to me, to my business, to my money. "Here's what's going to happen," I said, my voice taking on the tone I used when dealing with difficult suppliers. "You're going to stay away from my wife and my family. And if I find out you've involved them in any of your business problems, we're going to have a very different kind of conversation." Vernon chuckled. "Mr. Patterson, I don't think you understand the situation. Your wife has made certain commitments, financial and otherwise. Walking away isn't really an option at this point." I hung up the phone, but not before hearing him say, "We'll be in touch." 20 minutes later, Marlene came downstairs, hair still damp, wearing the robe I'd given her last Christmas. She looked relaxed, happy even, completely unaware that her lover had just threatened her husband. "Everything okay, honey?" she asked, settling next to me on the couch. "You look tense." I studied her face, looking for any sign that she knew what Vernon was planning. But all I saw was the woman I'd fallen in love with 13 years ago, now caught up in something that could destroy our family. "Marlene," I said carefully, "have you ever borrowed money from anyone recently? Maybe to help with a school fundraiser?" Her face went through several expressions: confusion, surprise, then something that looked like fear. "Why would you ask that?" she said. "Just wondering. Chuck Morrison mentioned seeing some unusual transactions on business accounts around town, making sure nothing's affecting us." It was a lie, but it served its purpose. Marlene's face went pale, and she started fidgeting with her wedding ring. "Leroy, if there was something, if I had made a mistake, would you forgive me?" The question hung in the air between us like smoke from a fire that was already burning out of control. Wednesday morning brought the kind of clarity that comes right before a storm. Marlene was getting ready for what she claimed was a final planning meeting for the school carnival, but I knew better. Chuck Morrison had confirmed that Vernon was planning something big, something that involved my wife and my money. I was in the kitchen making coffee when Marlene came downstairs, dressed in her best outfit and carrying the expensive purse Vernon had apparently bought her last month. "Another meeting?" I asked, keeping my tone casual. "Last one, I promise," Marlene said, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror. "After tonight, the carnival planning will be completely finished." She kissed my cheek, the same routine we'd followed for 15 years, but now it felt like theater. I watched her adjust her lipstick one more time, preparing for her performance with another man. "Marlene," I said as she reached for the door handle. She turned back, eyebrows raised in question. I looked directly into her eyes, those same green eyes I'd fallen in love with at a church barbecue, and said in the calmest voice I could manage, "Good luck with your date tonight." The change in her expression was instant and devastating. Her face went white, then red, then white again. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. The purse slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a sound like a judge's gavel. "Leroy, what are you?" She stammered, her voice breaking. "There's no need to explain," I said, stepping back and gently closing the door. The pounding started immediately. Desperate, frantic knocking mixed with muffled sobs and pleas. "Leroy, please. Let me explain. It's not what you think." But I was already walking away, my phone in my hand, dialing Chuck Morrison's number. "Chuck, it's Leroy. Whatever Vernon's planning for tonight, my wife just found out she's blown. Things are about to get very interesting." Through the door, I could hear Marlene's voice getting more desperate. Leroy, please. He threatened me. I never wanted any of this. Threaten her. That was the first honest thing she'd said in months. I sat down in my kitchen and waited. Within 10 minutes, my phone rang. Vernon Stockwell, right on schedule. Patterson, we need to talk. Now. I'm listening, I said. Your wife just called me in tears. Says you know about us. That's unfortunate, but it doesn't change our business arrangement. We don't have a business arrangement. Vernon's laugh was cold. Oh, but we do. See, your wife has been very helpful with certain investments. Money's been moved, commitments made. You can either work with me to resolve this quietly, or things get complicated for everyone. I felt my anger crystallize into something harder, more focused. Vernon, let me explain something to you. I've spent 20 years building a business by being fair, honest, and protecting what's mine. You've made the mistake of threatening my family. Mr. Patterson, I don't think you understand. No, you don't understand. I interrupted. You picked the wrong family to play games with, and you're about to find out why. Vernon's response was exactly what I expected from a desperate man with everything to lose. You've got 24 hours to come up with $50,000, or everyone's going to know what your precious wife has been doing. Photos, hotel receipts, bank records, the whole thing goes public. I'd been recording the call, of course. Chuck had taught me that much about gathering evidence. Vernon, I said calmly, you just made your second mistake. The first was involving my family. The second was trying to blackmail me. I hung up and immediately called Dale, my cousin in law enforcement. Dale, it's Leroy. Remember how I told you I might need that favor? Well, it's time. Within an hour, Dale was sitting in my kitchen with Chuck Morrison and a federal agent named Sarah Chun who specialized in extortion cases. The evidence Chuck had gathered, combined with Vernon's recorded threats, painted a clear picture of a predator who'd finally picked the wrong target. Mr. Patterson, Agent Chun said, we've been tracking Vernon Stockwell for 8 months. He's part of a larger operation that targets successful businessmen through their wives. You're the first victim who's fought back with this level of preparation. What about my wife? I asked. That depends, Dale said. How much did she know about his other activities? Before I could answer, there was a knock at the door. Through the window, I could see Marlene standing on the porch, looking like she'd been crying for hours. I opened the door, but didn't invite her in. Kids are at your mother's, I said. Figured this conversation was better without them around. Leroy, please, Marlene said, her voice raw. I never meant for any of this to happen. Vernon said he just needed some help, some advice about local businesses. When I found out what he was really doing. When exactly did you find out? Agent Chun asked, stepping into view. Marlene's eyes went wide when she saw the federal agent and Dale in uniform. Who? Why are the police here? Because your boyfriend's been running a con game across 3 states, I said. And you've been helping him, whether you knew it or not. Agent Chun pulled out a recording device. Mrs. Patterson, we have evidence that you provided Vernon Stockwell with detailed information about your husband's business, access to joint bank accounts, and introductions to other potential targets. We need to know exactly what you told him and when. I watched my wife realize that this wasn't just about adultery anymore. This was about federal crimes, prison time, and losing everything we built together. I want to make a deal, Marlene said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'll tell you everything Vernon told me, everyone he asked about, all his plans. But I want protection for my children. Agent Chun nodded. That can be arranged. But first, you're going to help us catch him. I looked at the woman I'd married 15 years ago, now prepared to betray her lover to save herself and protect our children. It should have felt like victory, but mostly it just felt like the end of everything I believed in. The federal courthouse in Charlotte was packed the day Vernon Stockwell's trial began. Agent Chun had been right. Our case had blown open a multi-state operation that had bilked dozens of families out of hundreds of thousands of dollars. Marlene's cooperation had been crucial in building the prosecution's case. I sat in the front row, watching my wife testify against the man who'd nearly destroyed our family. She looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of her choices. But when she spoke about how Vernon had manipulated her, threatened her, used her love for our children as leverage, I saw glimpses of the woman I'd married. Mrs. Patterson, the prosecutor asked, when did you realize that Mr. Stockwell was using you to access your husband's business information? When he started asking specific questions about our bank accounts, our suppliers, who owed us money, Marlene replied, her voice steady but quiet. He said it was just pillow talk, that he was interested in my life. But then he started taking notes. Vernon sat at the defendant's table, no longer the smooth-talking charmer who'd seduced my wife. Federal charges have a way of stripping away pretense. When he looked back at me during a recess, I didn't look away. I wanted him to see that he'd picked the wrong family to mess with. The trial lasted 6 days. Vernon got 12 years federal time, plus restitution to his victims. His gambling debts to Tommy Ricci's organization became someone else's problem. But the real justice came 3 months later, when Marlene and I sat down with our children to explain what had happened and what would happen next. "Dad," Ricky asked, "are you and Mom getting divorced?" I looked at Marlene, then back at my son. "Your mother made some serious mistakes that hurt our family. But she also helped catch some very bad people and keep other families from getting hurt. I'm moving to Grandma's house for a while," Marlene said, tears in her eyes. "Your father and I need time to figure out if we can fix what I broke." Tanya, wise beyond her 10 years, asked, "Will you still be our mom?" "Always," Marlene said, hugging her tight. "No matter what happens between your father and me, I will always be your mother, and I will always love you." 6 months later, the divorce was final. Marlene got supervised visitation and community service instead of prison time, thanks to her cooperation with the federal investigation. She moved back to her hometown, got a job at a dental office, and started rebuilding her life one honest day at a time. The kids and I stayed in our house on Maple Street. Business at the plant was better than ever. Turns out that standing up to criminals is good for your reputation in the meat processing industry. 2 years later, I stood in the same church where I'd married Marlene, watching my daughter Tanya sing in the children's choir. Ricky sat beside me, now 14, and already talking about joining the business after college. My family looked different than it had before, but it was still my family. Marlene came to every one of Tanya's choir performances, every one of Ricky's baseball games. We weren't husband and wife anymore, but we'd learned to be effective co-parents. The kids spent alternate weekends with her, and holidays were carefully coordinated affairs that prioritized their happiness over our complicated history. "She looks good," Ricky said, nodding toward his mother in the third pew. "She does," I agreed. Marlene had cut her hair shorter, started wearing clothes that were more professional than fashionable. She looked like someone who'd learned hard lessons and was trying to build something better from the pieces. After the service, we gathered outside the church for the usual post-performance photos and congratulations. Tanya ran over to hug both her parents, and for a moment, we almost looked like a normal family again. "Leroy," Marlene said quietly while the kids were talking to their friends, "I want you to know that I think about what I did every day. Not just the affair, but putting our children at risk, threatening everything you worked to build." "I know," I said. "The kids know too. But they also know that people can change, that mistakes don't have to define your whole life." She nodded, wiping away a tear. Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me? Really forgive me?" I thought about it for a moment, watching Ricky help his little sister with her choir robe, both of them laughing about something only they understood. "Marlene, forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened or pretending it didn't matter. It's about choosing not to let someone else's mistakes poison your own life. I forgave you a long time ago, for my sake and for theirs." She smiled then, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her since this whole mess started. "Thank you," she said simply. That evening, I sat on my back porch with a beer and the latest production reports from the plant. Business was expanding. We just signed contracts with 2 new restaurant chains and a grocery store cooperative. The house felt peaceful in a way it hadn't for years. My phone buzzed with a text from Chuck Morrison. Saw the news about Vernon getting denied parole. Justice served. "How are you holding up?" I typed back, "Good. Really good. Some foundations are stronger after they've been tested." Looking back now, I realized that the destruction of my marriage wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of a better one. Trust, once broken, can't be fully repaired. But strength, once discovered, becomes part of who you are. I'd learned that I was capable of protecting what mattered most, even when the threat came from inside my own home. That's a lesson worth more than any marriage that was built on lies.